Hi, everybody. It's Susie Singer-Carter, and I just wanted to take a minute to tell you about a wonderful product I just discovered. It's called Sociavi, and Sociavi in Latin means to share and unite. It is the simplest way for older adults and people with disabilities to connect and engage with their family and friends. There's no username, no password, no login, and no app to choose from. It's just a dedicated device. It's the Sociavi C2M Connect to Me device that's always on and ready to use. And families and caregivers just install the app on their smartphone. And then you can just begin sending photos, videos, and even have live-to-live video chats. And your loved ones, they don't have to do anything. They just love it. And because all of us must fight elder abuse and work together to bring awareness to this issue, Sociavi is supporting my efforts to produce my vital documentary, No Country for Old People. When you subscribe to Sociavi for your loved ones, they will donate the payments received, and you can help us reach our goal while connecting with your loved ones in the simplest way. Sociavi, connecting generations made simple globally. To learn more, please visit their website at www.sociavi.com. And when choosing the payments, select the annual subscription. The proceeds will go to help the production of our documentary, No Country for Old People, and I thank you so much.
When the world has got you down and
Alzheimer's sucks. It's an equal opportunity disease that chips away at everything we hold dear. And to date, there's no cure. So until there is, we continue to fight with the most powerful tool in our arsenal, love. This is Love Conquers Alls, a real and really positive podcast that takes a deep dive into everything Alzheimer's, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And now, here are your hosts, Susie Singer-Carter and me, Don Priest.
Hello, everybody. It's been a while. This is Susie Singer-Carter.
And this is Don Priest, and this is Love Conquers Alls. Hello, Susan.
Donald.
Yes.
We're here. We're doing a show. It's been, what, a month?
I don't
or
even
something.
know.
This is I don't know. This is the longest we've taken a break for because we're so deeply entrenched in our documentary, No Country for Old People. And I forgot about Love Conquers Alls. I didn't forget about it. We just had literally no time. But how you been?
I've been,
Let's
pretty
talk
good.
about me.
Let's talk about me talking about you. No.
No, please
No, been pretty
stop.
good. No, we have. No, what we've done is
We-
aggregated an amazing group of advocates and experts. And
Don and I drove for what should have been a 6-hour, 7-hour drive to San Francisco to film 4 rock stars for this documentary. Ended up taking us about close to 11 hours because
it was
we were
9 hours for God's
It
sake.
felt like 24 hours. We were in his handy dandy electric car, which are not meant for long trips, folks.
Well, they can be. We stopped twice, and you just had to
3
wait
times.
a little time. We only stopped twice, and it took some time, but it was delightful because we didn't actually take any money out of our wallets to pay for gas. So that was the best part.
That
but
is
no,
true.
we had a great set of interviews.
We had a
despite
great
our
set of interviews,
challenges
just-
of our
Yes.
hotel room.
So let me just quickly tell you guys, because this is funny. We made a reservation for a suite, a Hilton suite, so that we would save money. It was a 2-bedroom suite, and we went 2 bedrooms, and then we thought we'll shoot the interviews in the
Living
the
room.
glamorous living room. I don't even know how they could get away with using the word suite, because we walked in, it was like we were in
It was not sweet.
Green Acres. It was Green
not-
Acres, if anybody
it was,
knows.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
it was really bad.
And
it was as big as a parking spot.
Tiny,
yeah.
And
It was
we're
as
like,
big as a
oh my
parking
goodness,
spot.
we have to bring in video equipment and lighting and have a beautiful background, of which there was no beautiful background.
So I made one.
Yeah. She put her own coat because the pillows were so drab and covered
Yeah.
this pillow with her coat. And then with the flowers, we were like, there's no vases here. None at
No
all.
vases at all.
So, the art director, Susie, ended up using a Kleenex box cover, a big plastic water bottle, and the ice bucket.
Ice bucket.
That was in the room as vases in the background.
And it looked great. So anyway, you do what you got to do. Content rules. That's the magic of movies. Anyway, so what
Yeah.
we speaking of magic, we have a really
Yes.
magical person today that
We do.
I just got really fond of her, like from this interview that we did for the documentary, and both Rick Mountcastle said, you got to have her on your podcast. So here she is, and why don't you introduce her?
I'm going to. Today our guest is Gail WEATHERILL, and Gail is a registered nurse, a board-certified Alzheimer's educator, and the author of The Caregiver's Guide to Dementia, Practical Advice for Caring for Yourself and Your Loved One. Her career has spanned 4 decades, from an intensive care head nurse in Saudi Arabia to the director of nursing in a Virginia nursing home. Gail has done it all. For the last 20 years, she has focused on the care of people living with dementia and the education of their caregivers. She practices as her professional alter ego, the dementia nurse. Her ability to hear hearts instead of brains gives her a unique understanding of those with dementia and the people who love them. Gail's irreverent approach to the American healthcare machine makes her an effective and sought-out advocate for those in the deepest need. And she has participated in the Nurses Take DC movement for safe staffing ratios in our hospitals and long-term care facilities. Through her writing, speaking, and coaching, Gail lives to educate dementia caregivers one heart at a time. And we are honored to have her with us today. So let us not wait another moment and say hello to Gail WEATHERILL. Hello, Gail.
Yay! Hello!
Yay!
Let the
Welcome.
games begin.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I love, Gail, I love that you listen to hearts and not brains, because that's the key. That's such a nice way to frame it, about work, living and caregiving for and loving somebody with Alzheimer's and dementia. And that's the biggest obstacle I've found is people not understanding that there's other ways to communicate. So, but tell us a little bit about how did you start as a nurse, but how did you shift your focus onto dementia? What attracted you to that?
Well, I kind of fell into it more by accident than by design. I had worked in intensive care for 17 years, and I just wanted to do something different. And I started doing home care, and most of the people I worked with in home care were people who were elderly, and a large proportion of people who are elderly have some degree of cognitive impairment, whether it's from Alzheimer's or other kinds of dementia. And so I just started working with these folks, and what I found was I had a way of communicating with them, and it really did go back down to communicating heart to heart rather than brain to brain. Because with Alzheimer's disease and other diseases that cause dementia, basically you're having brain failure. We talk about heart failure, we talk about kidney failure, we talk about failures, but we don't necessarily hear people say brain failure. And that really is what dementia is. It's brain failure. So all the chatter and the language that we normally use to communicate with, if you've got brain failure, it's not going where it needs to go. And so the challenge is to find another way to communicate. And I absolutely found that the eyes are the windows to the soul. And so it really was, I'm watching you and you're watching me, eye to eye, and that is how I got into that sort of arena. And I found that I loved doing it. I found that I could help families to look at things in a different light. People just need a different perspective than what they've traditionally been told to do. So that was
so
sort of,
agree.
that was the way it took off, and then it just went from there. And everywhere I went to work, that was the first thing I wanted to know is how many people here have dementia or Alzheimer's, because those were the folks that I really enjoyed working with the most.
So how did you discover that, though? Because, from my own story, my mother was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, and then it turns into Alzheimer's. and she's the only person I knew at the time that had Alzheimer's. So I was making every mistake in the book, you know. I was trying to remind her. I was going to fix it. I was going to keep repeating, because then it would learn. She'd learn, you know. And then it took me a very long time to realize I needed to communicate with her a different way. But it sounds like you had it instinctually, like you just were intuitively connected. Yeah.
You're correct. You are correct. And I often say that one of the great side benefits of having grown up in a really difficult household, where you had to take the temperature of the environment at all times as a self-preservation feature. So I honed those skills. I can, with the slightest change of a face muscle, or when someone, their eyes shift in a certain way, or they're tapping their fingers, or 1,000 other nonverbal ways of communicating, that was it. I spent 18 years practicing with the best, and so I've had an opportunity to sort of use those difficult times and turn that into an asset in working with these people with dementia. And it has been the pleasure of my life. It really has.
Wow.
Do you think that's something that can be taught?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And, well, I almost want to say it's something that can be untaught. What we need to be is untaught to use language. I do a lot of work with nurses in hospitals and talking to them about how to manage people with dementia when they're in the hospital. And what I say to them is, if somebody had heart failure, you wouldn't try to talk them into having a better cardiac output. So
Right.
why do you think you can talk someone with brain failure into having better synapse connections? You can't. And that's sort of the unteaching of our reliance on language to communicate what it is we want somebody to do or what we don't want them to do. We just have to take off the old hat and put on a different set of glasses to be able to do that.
It's an odd stigma that occurs with humans because we adapt to our pets, right? We look for physical cues and different kinds of cues that aren't verbal, right? And we do it with our children, and you know, before they can speak, and we allow them to. We look, we investigate. What does that mean? What does that cry mean? What is that? Is that a happy? Is that a sad? Are they in pain? Is it this? And yet we, for some reason, we are so disrespectful or, you know, dismissive
Uneducated
of our
and uneducated.
well, uneducated for sure, but that comes with, you know, there's a desire to want to learn. Like I wanted to learn, and because I wanted to stay in contact. And before you answer, I just want to say I love that realization that you had about your childhood, because I had a very difficult, a happy and a difficult childhood, because I lived with a very dominating father who was very brilliant but also was very demanding, and I learned to read cues like no other. And I think that's probably why I'm so intuitive with people, and I was able to read my mom so well. But I think you're right. That's an interesting observation.
It's true. And I think part of what makes it so hard for us to, whether you want to call it, you know, it's not so much a disrespect as it is being entrenched in the way that we've communicated with that person for decades. You know, when it's a toddler, you're used to them not using language because that's the way they started out. And so this is nothing new when they're 2 years old and they're throwing a hissy fit. You know, when you're 80 years old and your father has, you know, you've spent all those decades communicating with them in a certain way, it's a matter of, again, unlearning what we've learned over the years and knowing that we just have to come at it from a different angle. And absolutely the analogy of young children who don't have language, it's not that we want to say that these people are children, because they're not. Their minds function, their hearts function as an adult who's had all these life experiences. So no, they're not children, but in the way that they don't rely on language or can't rely on language to communicate their needs is an important analogy. I always say that all behavior has meaning. So when Grandpa is swinging from the chandeliers, it's not because he sat in the corner all day and said, let me see what I can do to really irk the heck out of them. It's because something's wrong and he doesn't have the ability to communicate what it is. And it goes back just like with a toddler. Are they wet? Are they hungry? Are they in pain? And you just tick off the different things. But you have to understand that talking to them and telling them they're okay, or asking them to tell you, is not going to get anywhere, and it's just going to increase your frustration, which in turn increases their frustration, because they very much mirror the emotional state of the people they're engaged with.
I agree with you. Yes. Do you think so? And I thank you for correcting me, because you're right. The fact that there's a very good point. The fact that we have to look at the people that we've communicated with in a certain way for so many years, and now adjust how we communicate with them. What I think would be interesting, I just want to throw this out to you, is that if these life changes were more incorporated into our culture, and in terms of acceptance and understanding and education in terms of how the life cycle goes, then we wouldn't be so shocked by it, and we wouldn't be so thrown off balance, and maybe the loss wouldn't be as great, because it takes an adjustment. It took me an adjustment to go, oh, I'm losing my mommy. Okay, now I'm mommy. And so, and I embraced it, and it made me feel good. But, that's not to say that from that point to the other point wasn't a difficult journey. It was, because we don't learn about it.
No, we don't learn about it. And, there are different reasons for that. Part of it is, in the grand scheme of things, Alzheimer's and other diseases that cause dementia are relatively new on the world stage. Yes, it's been decades and decades and decades. Alzheimer's was named after a woman in the 1800s, early 1900s, but back when I started in my career 40 years ago, you never heard of Alzheimer's. You heard of people with wet brain from drinking too much, which is now we call it Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, because that's what it is a syndrome. But you didn't hear about it. So we didn't grow up watching our mothers take care of our grandmothers with this particular problem. We don't have role models to follow. It's very much, and that is one reason why I got into this whole focus on education and coaching and counseling with caregivers, because who tells you this stuff? How are you supposed to know? You weren't born knowing, and you can read a lot of books, but that doesn't mean you're going to know what to do in the moment when emotions are high and things are going wrong, and you're just have been sleep deprived for the last 3 weeks, and it's just a lot to take in. But once we understand that we're unlearning the way we used to communicate, and we're coming into new ways of communicating, then it becomes a bit of an adventure. But you're right that we're not supported, and we certainly aren't supported in the healthcare system. That's for doggone sure. Mm-hmm. And very much of that boils down to two factors. It's ageism and it's ableism. And the stigma and the penalty for falling into the wrong category on those two spectrums is tremendous, tremendous. They're all, well, we're going to put our money over here into something else. It's a real challenge It's a real challenge.
It is. You have been an advocate, that you've been advocating for this kind of change, for a shift in a consciousness, in terms of our providers.
Yeah.
I mean, can you talk a little bit about your advocacy and your frustration or your successes? I mean, talk about that, because I'm in the trenches of it, and I find it daunting.
Right.
The process.
Well, I'll give you a quickie success story. I did have a gentleman who had some dementia, but it was relatively mild. And what was happening was he had met this young lady who immediately fell madly in love. It didn't have anything to do that he was the former CEO of a major international company and loaded to the max. It was because she really loved him. And so he was going to the bank every other day and pulling out literally tens of thousands of dollars in cash and giving it to this girl. Well, oh my goodness. Everybody knew what was going on, but because his doctor would not certify him as being incompetent, no one could do anything about it. And when all was said and done, and he finally came to his senses and realized what was going on, and his family went to try and take some action against this individual, what we found is there was nothing criminal in terms of criminal law on the books to prosecute someone from doing this to a person who was so vulnerable and so broken. And so we started going to the legislature, and we went back. It took us 3 years to get there, but my motto was they had the laws tucked away under civil law, and I just kept saying there is nothing civil about what this girl did to this man, and we need to make this a criminal offense. And in the end, we did manage to do that. And
oh, that's fantastic.
It's a small step, and it's a drop in the middle of a pretty big ocean, but that's how we get there. Every year, Nurses Take DC is an organization that we work during the year, but we definitely every May show up on the steps of the Capitol for a rally for safe staffing ratios, whether it's in hospitals or nursing homes. Right now, the number of residents or patients that are assigned to each individual nurse precludes giving the kind of care that we nurses know these patients deserve and that we know how to give, but physics enters into it, and we have to work within time constraints. So we've made a little progress on the staffing ratios, and of course the industry's wringing their hands, but even the ratios that we've managed to pass so far have been pretty low. So, which is really, when I go back and look at it, I don't expect in my lifetime to shift the healthcare system. I'm not that crazy. Or idealistic, or all of the above. So what I've made my focus is educating consumers and educating caregivers and saying, these are what your rights are. This is how you can exercise them within the constraints of this broken healthcare system that we have. Because that was going to be the quickest, fastest way I could get to people to make life better, a little easier, to give a better quality of life to at least a few people. And as my work has grown over the years, it's more and more people, which has been really gratifying and kind of shocking.
What you say is so important, because as we're doing this documentary, people say, well, it's such a huge problem. You're never going to make a difference. It's too big. It's too big. It's too big. But that said, and it's just something like you just said, if you changed or saved the life of 5 people, of 2 people, of 1 person, you've changed that person's lives, their family's lives, their friends' lives. And so, yes, we have to just kind of say, yes, it's a huge problem, but there's no reason we shouldn't chip away at it.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, several years ago, two other ladies and I started a closed group on Facebook for family caregivers of people with Alzheimer's and other kinds of dementia. And you know, we started out, we wanted to have a place where caregivers could go and say the things that they can't say anywhere else. I'm going to kill him if he does this one more time, and that sort of thing. People need that outlet, and they need to know they're not a horrible person when they feel that way. They're human beings. But we started that, and 2016 was the beginning of that, and in 2023 we have 58,000 members from over 100 different countries. And not a day goes by that I don't get a message from somebody that says, this group saved my life, because everybody in there knows what everybody else is dealing with. There's understanding there, and even if I'm having a horrible day, I've still got a word of encouragement for somebody else whose day's going even worse than mine is. So it's, you know, power to the people sort of thing. It's from the bottom up that we're trying to change minds and change hearts.
Agree, 100%. It is power of the people. That's what we are hoping to do. You know, it really is. And I think it's just a shift of perspective, like you said. And we're, you know, I give people the benefit of the doubt that they didn't know, like I didn't know this
Right.
system. I didn't know how bad the system was, and I didn't realize the ableism and the ageism that was so prevalent. It's so prevalent. It's really a fatal combination in a lot of ways, you know, and especially if you don't have your loved one in the home.
Yes, and, you know, I have a special heart for people who have had to go into memory care, which is basically a subdivision in most states. It's a subdivision of assisted living. The long-term care facilities, there's a nursing home, then there's assisted living and memory care, and then there's home health. So there's a continuum of how much care comes from professionals. And the higher up on that list you go, the farther away you are from home, the farther away you are from family, and the more vulnerable you are to broken systems. And I mean, we've all heard the horror stories. You never have to look very far about the instances of abuse in nursing homes, and people use nursing home as kind of an umbrella term for long-term care. But even with these folks in dementia care, all the company has to say is, "Oh, they have dementia. They're just making that up. That never happened." But there are ways to look at our loved ones and to keep track of, you know, are they losing weight at a rapid rate? How's their skin looking? Different things that we can learn and know, so that even if we haven't been able to continue care in the home, that we're still involved. I always tell caregivers, you know, you get this idea that once your loved one goes into the nursing home, that, okay, my caregiving days are over. Well, that's definitely a false idea, because you'll still be just as much of a caregiver. It's just going to look different than it did when you had that individual at home, and you'll have break periods where you can actually sleep at night or not have to be worried that your loved one's going to have some sort of a breakdown and have hallucinations and start wanting to break your arm, because those things do happen in homes.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But so, you know, when we're talking to a lot of people about long term, and there are different, and then, you know, and Alzheimer's can be a very long disease, and it can be,
Yes.
it can eventually manage to bankrupt most people if they live long enough through it,
Absolutely.
because it's just a long disease. And if you have to go into memory care because you've advanced, it's very expensive, and so your money doesn't last very long. So you know, unless you're in the 1%, you're going to end up on Medicaid and Medicare, you know, and
Right.
You're going to be reliant on that. I found it, and I still find it, and everybody I talk to seems to have a different definition of what is Medicaid and Medicare, and what is hospice and palliative, and the differences, and what your loved one is, has, what are they offered in these programs? What's different? And because it seems like, one person says, well, palliative gives you this. Your mom should be in palliative. Yeah. No, your mom should be in hospice. This is where, you get taken care of and you get extra care. I found it the opposite, right? So what's your take on those different kinds of programs?
One of the problems that we have is if we've gone through an experience, we think we know. If my mom was in hospice, then I think I know how hospice works. So I'll tell somebody, but the truth is not every hospice operates exactly the same way. Medicaid in particular is pretty much governed at the state level. They get funding from the federal level, but in terms of regulations and how the industry is run and who qualifies for Medicaid and how you qualify, what hoops you have to jump through, it varies from state to state. So I'm always warning caregivers in my group, when somebody else in this group tells you, oh, this is the truth, I'm like, well, that was the truth for them in their state in that year. That doesn't mean it is for you. It really, and that's this whole problem of communication. It's like with healthcare, and I consider all of this part of healthcare because it is. It's caring for your physical, mental well-being. It's like for families, we just pick you up, carry you to the most remote region in China where you've never been to China in your life and you don't speak a word of Chinese, and we just drop you in there and expect you to find your way. It is a foreign language, and it does mean a lot of different things. And that's one reason that I do so much. I do a lot of teaching. I also do a lot of coaching and counseling one-on-one, because if I don't know exactly how Medicaid works in your state, I know how to find out how it works. Mm-hmm. And that's mm-hmm. what we need. I mean, my vision is someday it won't be the dementia nurse, it'll be the dementia nurses, because nurses are the ones who understand what the impact is on a family of these diseases mm-hmm. that can go on for long and long. You have no idea how long the money's going to need to last. You have no idea how long you're going to be able to keep them at home. Talk about anxiety producing. It's just, in all the years that I've been a nurse, there is nothing, absolutely nothing that compares to having a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or some other form of dementia from another illness. God bless, my mother died from lung cancer. She had a terrible time. It was a walk in the park compared to what people with dementia and their families have to walk through. Because with dementia, there is no hope for a cure. You know they're not going to get better. They're only going to keep getting worse. There are a lot of things that are just different. And that's another piece of educating the public that, people are going through this. The people down the block from you behind closed doors, you have no idea what these people are dealing with. So yes, the language is a big barrier. But I will tell you, I'm sorry, I will tell you, if you get a copy of the Caregiver's Guide to Dementia by yours truly, I do have it outlined in there, the differences between these different levels of care and different organizations and how you can compare and have an idea for what sorts of things your loved one should be entitled to.
Yeah, that is a wonderful resource, because I could not figure out what my mom was entitled to, and it seemed to me that I was
still don't know. Susie
like
still
snow.
Don't know.
Because when I was told my mom should go into hospice, that came after a horrible experience where I was like, oh, good, safe. She's going to be safe. And she's going to get the care she actually needs now. And instead, they just took away all her care. And, they were just basically like, pushing her out the door. And I was like, wait, that's not what you said. And then the other doc, the next time she bounced into a hospital, was like, well, she shouldn't be in hospice. She should be in palliative. Oh, well, what's palliative? How's that different than hospice, And we just don't know, and
we still
tired,
don't know,
we're emotional.
Because everyone has a different definition, as you said. There is literally a completely different definition, and so even if you know, in theory, you still don't know.
Yeah, you don't. And actually, I'll give Medicare its due. They run a database called care.We'r, where you can type in your zip code and look at what kind of care you're looking for. Are you looking for hospice care, nursing home? Are you looking for home health care? And they keep a database with information about the organizations that provide those services within your physical area. And there's a lot of good information in there, because a hospice is not a hospice is not a hospice. They are not all the same. And yes, there are organizations that are like, okay, well, we'll just cut off everything because everything we do give them is going to cost us money, and we're supposed to be a profitable enterprise here. But then you go down the street and there's a hospice that will turn themselves inside out, upside down, and blue and purple to do anything to help you and your family get through such a difficult situation. So it's, when you say people still don't know, it's true, because this group on Main Street does it this way and the group over on Elm Street does it a totally different way. So even then, you still have to do your research and your homework, and who the heck teaches you how to do that?
Nobody. It's really, really, you feel like you're just out on an island, because nobody really speaks that language, like you said. Nobody does. And all the people that say they know you're getting bombarded with all different kinds of answers, and you don't know which one is right. And it's why I say it's like playing whack-a-mole, because I don't know. We go, oh, that sounds good, I'll do that. Well, that's not what you said it was going to be. I thought you said this. Oh no, we didn't say that. And then you go, oh my gosh, and now you just want to, now it becomes like Stockholm syndrome, because you go, well, it's not as bad as yesterday, so I guess it's okay.
I see that
when
all
it doesn't
the
go
time.
bad, yeah, when it doesn't go bad, you think it's good. Well,
that's
just the
you're
fact
exhausted.
that something bad didn't happen, you think that's good, as opposed to just real care and really, getting the type of care that the person needs. It's just
right.
And I've seen friends, like I've seen my I just want to say one more thing, but then I'm going to give you the floor. But I've seen my colleagues, like my girlfriends that I grew up with, whose parents are getting, in that age range. And one of them, right before my mom passed, the week before my mom passed, they were in the same facility, and it was just decided that she needed to go into hospice. They didn't know why. Her mother didn't have dementia, and was saying, am I dying? I'm not ready to die. But the doctors were saying she's ready to move into hospice, and she died within 2 days. But and everybody in the family, and I'm not throwing shade on them as a family. I'm pointing out that it was just accepted, as opposed to questioning. Yeah, right. And it kind of broke my heart.
Well, physicians are socialized in this country and to be gods, and the general public is socialized to consider them gods. You don't question the doctor. My God, he's sitting here gracing you with his time and his infinite wisdom, and you're going to open your mouth and question something he says? Oh, no. That is not how proper people behave. We've made some progress in that arena, but it's moving the needle a hair's breadth, and that's about it. We're conditioned to not question. We're conditioned to accept. And I recently had a family say to me, I knew that their loved one was getting terrible care, and was basically being neglected quite a bit. And the response was, well, at least they're not abusing her. And that just broke my heart, because I was like, okay, that's the standard we've gotten to. As long as they're not, smacking them upside the head, then whatever else short of that. And it's the same with physicians, oh boy, the horror stories I get with that is it's the same. The people that you would expect to be your ally and to be your educators turn out not to be that way. And the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and that's all there is to it, which is why I focus on consumer education rather than provider education, because they're a bit of a lost cause in my book, at least for my lifetime. I'm not going to move that needle before I get a chance to check out of here, so I'm focused on consumers learning.
Do you think that the person that is the squeaky wheel, there's always that thought in the back of your head, oh, but if I complain, they might make it worse.
Retaliation.
So
exactly.
Is there a real concern for that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's a real phenomenon. It really is. You go into any facility and you ask, who is that family? And everybody dreads being labeled as that family. And, so the way I look at that is you have to pick your battles. You have to accept that not everything is going to be the way that it would be if you were taking care of them or if you had them at home. If you complain about everything that is not the way it should be, then you completely lose your voice. You look at the things that really make a big difference in your loved one's quality of life. Are they getting to activities? No. Well, that's important, because it's boring as heck to sit around and watch the paint peel off the walls and nothing to do. So that's an important thing to go to bat for. Is it, they brought her orange juice when they know full well she really wants apple juice in the morning. Well, I wouldn't break my neck trying to advocate for that. Those things are going to happen. And we have to learn to differentiate what are the things that are really going to make a difference in our loved one's life. And if it's something that's going to make a difference, then I say squeak away.
Especially if it's safety. Anything to do
with
with
safety. Safety's big.
Yeah. And I felt it. My family felt it. My Dawn being my family felt it. And I say it in my documentary that it doesn't feel good when you're trying to advocate, respectfully advocate, and you're suddenly become persona non grata. You're the pariah every time you walk in, and if you say hi, good morning, and I've always been the happy girl, and you get stone faces, and you think, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
And it hurt. It's painful because
it is painful. It is painful.
Yeah.
And you can't help but go to bed at night and think, I wonder if they're ignoring my mother because they're PO'd about what I complained about last week. It's
right.
It's
and that's
a real
just not
issue.
fair. That's where the system, that is a big issue, because we shouldn't have to worry about that. We shouldn't have to worry that if we see something bad and we say it, that it's going to make things even worse. That's just not our country. That's not what this country was built on, and it doesn't feel right. And that's why the system really, really needs a makeover big time, because there are good places. I know there are good places, but it doesn't take away from the bad places. Is
there anything that can be done if you feel like that's happening? If you feel like, okay, I am the enemy now. Is there something that can be done to help smooth that out, or was it just, what? It is what it is.
Hey, this is Susie Singer-Carter, and I just wanted to take a minute to talk to you about bed sores. I know, but if you're like I was, you probably don't have a clue what a bed sore really is. Most people don't. No one told me, and I really just assumed it was part of the body that was, like the name says, sore from laying in one position too long. And if you change the position, all better. Wrong. Bed sore is really a euphemism for more appropriate names, such as pressure wound, and cubitus ulcer. Unfortunately, I discovered what a bed sore really was when my mom was admitted into the hospital last year with a stage 4 ulcer. That is the worst level. You don't ever want that to happen. Bed sores can develop quickly and worsen rapidly and can lead to serious health issues, even death, if they're not properly treated or properly treated, and that includes cleaning and dressing the wound, but most importantly, reducing pressure off the sore by frequently changing the position of the person off of their wound so it can heal. And that can mean propping the person up 30 degrees to the side, far enough to be off the lower back, but not too far as to be on the side hip where there isn't much cushion, right, between the skin and the bone. This is why I'm so excited to tell you about Bed Sore Rescue, which was designed by an amazing woman, Gwen Jewell, a nurse who was tired of fooling around with simple pillows and bulky wedges that just don't work. The Bed Sore Rescue positioning wedge cushions are uniquely designed to provide ergonomically correct and comfortable support for a sustained period of time without touching the sore. And the curvatures and bilateral angles make it possible for the bed sore cushion to be used to support many other body parts as well. You can float the heels, you can put it under the head, you can put it under the arms, behind the knees, both sides. You can even use it as a breakfast in bed table. The curvatures of the Bed Sore Rescue fit the curvatures of your person's body, and it's made to meet all the patient safeties and bed-bound positioning standards for acute and long-term care facilities. I wish I had it for my mom. I really do. So chances are, if you have a loved one in a long-term care facility or at your home, you may become a pressure injury soldier too. But bed sores should never get to stage 4. And one way to ensure that they don't is to make sure that as soon as one begins to develop, you keep the pressure off. You can do that easily with Bed Sore Rescue. And you can find Bed Sore Rescue and many other pressure solutions online at Jewell Nursing Solutions, home of the patented Bed Sore Rescue positioning wedge cushions, pads, and pillows. That's Jewell, Jewell, NursingSolutions.com. And when you use the special code NCFOP, the entire amount of your purchase will go to support our important documentary, No Country for Old People, which chronicles my mother's journey navigating the nursing home long-term care crisis that literally began with an unreported, untreated pressure wound. So take the pressure off yourself and your loved one with the Bed Sore Rescue.
Well, those aren't the only 2 choices. One, I always say it's traumatic for people to move to a different facility, which
Yes.
once your bridge is burned to a certain degree, nothing's going to fix it short of just moving on to a different facility and different group of caregivers. But there are things that you can do short of that, because a move is traumatic to people with brain failure. It's not as traumatic as being left in a place that's not safe, but it is traumatic. So if there are ways to go to the administration and just put it out there and say, I've been bringing these things to you. I've tried really hard to bring them respectfully. I've tried to choose my battles and what things I want to trouble you with. But now I'm getting the feeling that I'm just really worried about my loved one being snubbed or ignored or even mistreated because people are tired of hearing me complain. And I think just being open and honest about that is a step. Does that mean I think they're going to say, oh, you're right, oh my gosh, I can't believe that's happening in our facility and we're going to fix it right now? They might say that. They might say that to you, but we all know what the likelihood is of that actually happening. But I don't know, I'm just the kind that thinks, if something's wrong, bring it into the light. And if once you brought it into the light, it's still wrong, then you can move on to other ways of dealing with it. But I would start with just acknowledging my fear to the people that are taking care of my loved one, that I'm concerned about this. I'm concerned that I can't speak up.
And of course, moving to another facility, you don't know what you're getting into there also. I mean, you could just be moving right to it could be a lateral movement. Yeah.
There are ways to do research, though. There are ways to do some research. But you're right. But what I see is I see people staying in terrible situations for that very reason. They say, well, what if I go through all this trouble and move them somewhere and they're just as bad or worse? Well, yeah, that could happen. Or they could get to a new place that's wonderful. I get that a lot of the time in my big Facebook group. People will say, you know, I don't want to move her because they'll be just as bad down the street. But then you get somebody that pipes up and says, don't put up with that. Don't put up with that. Take your mom out of there. Move her to somewhere else. That's what I did. And the second place was terrific. They cared about my mother and they cared about me. So, you know, sometimes
take
you
the
just
power
have to
back,
take a
right?
leap of faith. Exactly.
Yeah, and take your power back, because we are the customer. We feel like we're just so dependent on the facilities, and we feel like we need to be so grateful, which we should be. But I mean, if they're not treating your family member right, then then you need to leave.
Yeah.
I agree with you, because because we are the customer. They need us. So if we're going to look at it as a
Right.
business, then we have to look at it that way. So be it.
Somebody's cutting a mighty big check every month for that facility. You know,
Yep.
Where else would you go and pay somebody $9,000, $10,000 and more a month to mistreat your loved one? What kind of sense does that make? You know?
It doesn't.
You wouldn't do it with your child if they were in a bad
Nope.
private school. You wouldn't do it. You wouldn't keep them
or
there.
your pet, or your
Yep.
pet, or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to switch gears for a second and talk about your expertise in communicating with people with Alzheimer's, and give us some tips on that. Give us some practical ways to connect. You know, like I'll give you an example. One of my mentors, who is Judy Cornish with the Dawn Method. I love her. She has said to me, you know, you have to go in and remember that your loved one might not know who you are. So help them out. So I did. Every single time I go to see my mom, I would say, you know, good morning, Mommy. It's Susie, your favorite daughter, the one you love the most, because I'm your only daughter. And I'd make her laugh, and you know, and I start off always reminding her who I was. So that's just like an example that helped me.
Right.
And so, share some of yours.
Well, that's definitely a good one, because a lot of what we see with folks is they're embarrassed that they don't know, you know? So when you can go in and say, oh, just as you just explained, this is who I am. Same thing if, you know, somebody else is coming into your home to visit. It might be someone that your loved one has known for the last 50 years, but you still introduce them. And the other thing that you can do when you're going to have visitors come in to see your loved one is educate that person in advance, so they don't come in and keep saying, do you remember when we did X? Because then your loved one feels
Right.
bad. Because no, they don't remember when they did X, and they don't know who to Sam Hill you are anyway, and why are you asking me all these dumb questions? We really have to look at it, and we always say you have to go into their world, you have to look at it through their eyes. Pets are a great tool for communicating with people with brain failure. I always said when I worked in the nursing home, if we could have pets and toddlers every day, then we could take the entire medication cart and throw it in the bottom of the ocean. And what's the reason for that? The reason for that is that pets and toddlers don't depend on language to communicate. And because they don't use language, the person who has brain failure doesn't have to try to decipher what this child is communicating. They look at their face. They look at the big smile and the big blue eyes and whatever.
Right.
They look at the giggle. They see the dog's tail going 1,000 miles an hour wagging. Yeah, this animal's glad to see me. So one of the big things for folks that I always say is you need to talk about a tenth. You need to, if you use 100 words to explain something to someone, you need to cut that down to 10 words or less. It's a natural instinct, I think, and maybe I'm just sympathetic because I'm full of words and other things. But when people are trying to compute what it is you're saying, the fewer words you use, and then if you combine language with gestures or showing, we're going to pull your sweater over your head. And doing that before you pull the sweater over your head. To combine that, it really is, we go back to the toddler analogy, you don't just sit there with your hands folded and tell this child things and expect them to understand what it is that you said and to do what it is you want them to do. So we shouldn't expect that with our loved ones too.
Yeah, we can almost equate that to, if let's picture for, if somebody comes in and starts speaking a foreign language to you that you do not know a single word, you would just sit there and be frustrated and as opposed to them just literally, you could probably go in and not say a single word and just communicate with music and gestures and facial expressions, and suddenly they're not frustrated anymore. They're not scared. I think it's probably scary too to not understand.
Oh yeah, it's terrifying.
Or for them not to be, and especially when they get to the point where they cannot speak, they can't say anything. So now they don't have to. There's not that pressure anymore. So I think if we can equate that to that, if somebody came in and started speaking French or Chinese, and I don't know French or Chinese, how would you react? Yeah.
Well, one of the big things that people who are still taking care of a loved one at home really struggle with is getting a loved one to take a bath, take a shower. And, there are a lot of different reasons that people with brain failure resist. It may be that the drops of water sting them when they hit them. Things you wouldn't think about. We get in the shower and we're thinking about, what we should have done yesterday and the 29 things we got to make sure we get done today. We're not thinking about this is hitting me. These drops are hurting. Or they don't see the water and they think it's just confusing to them. They get cold at the drop of a hat. They don't understand that maybe they've had some bad experience in the past in a swimming accident or something. Or for whatever reason, when they get in that shower, they think they're drowning. And so we have to be able to consider those things and find workarounds. I mean, I'm a big believer in getting all the big towels you can find and putting them in the dryer and turning it on high heat before you get started with the shower, so that when you're done, you've got these warm towels to wrap them up in.
That sounds good. That sounds great.
That's the thing. And it's,
good.
There's a lot of things like using lavender. I get a lot of reports from that. Have a diffuser going in the bathroom with lavender, or in the home or anywhere that they're having a hard time or they're struggling. It has been known, there are studies that have proven that particular scent does help decrease anxiety, and all these other, different non-mainstream interventions. And that's, I'm sorry, but modern medicine just doesn't have doodly squat to offer these folks with brain failure. They don't have a drug to cure the condition, and the drugs that they have to minimize the symptoms, half of them have black box warnings, which means if you're on it, your chance of dying is higher than if you weren't on it. So looking at these alternative treatments, CBD, cannabidiol, CBD, whether it's oil or gummies or salves, is an excellent alternative. It's plant-based. It's the incidence, you literally cannot overdose or die from having too much CBD. It may wreck your stomach a little bit, but it's not going to kill you. Not like the drugs that, we get handed at the doctor's office every week. So
Right.
Not that, I mean, I'm not anti-drugs. I'm really not, because I've seen a lot of people whose quality of life was immensely improved through getting some of these medications, the antipsychotic medications that have such a bad reputation. You've got to cast your net wide and try a lot of different things for your loved one.
Right.
And just be willing to go through trial and error, because that's what it takes to find what's going to help them the most.
That's so important. You're right. It's trial and error, because it's not just one fix. You can't just say, because we're not one size fits all. We're individuals, and everybody is different, you know, and I agree with you 100%. And so let's say we get to the stage like my mom was at the end of, in the middle, right before she died, the last couple months, not much words coming out, if any. How do you communicate with someone at that stage? What's the tricks that you think are the best?
Oh, you know, I have this saying, and I actually have it on a magnet, and I send it out to people sometimes because I think it's so important. And the saying that I use is, what the brain cannot remember, the heart can never forget. The brain may not remember who you are, but their heart is in there, and their heart knows who you are. They can't communicate that to you in a way that you understand, but it's in there and it feels you. So for people to say there's no point in visiting because she doesn't even know I'm there, that's not accurate. And this came from all my years of working in intensive care units, because I worked with so many people who were right on the verge with one foot in this world and one foot in whatever comes after that. And I just experienced so many things where I just felt like there were, people were communicating on a spirit level. I would always tell people, if you can't be here at the moment, then, you know, you might want to be at home sitting in the rocker that the two of you sat in and drank beer and talked trash for the last, 40 years. That may mean something more to you. And they're going to know that you're there. Because when we get that close, we're communicating heart to heart. Music is huge. What's the music that was meaningful to that person? Touch is huge. You know, you don't have to give them a full body massage, but boy, just a tender rubbing of the face.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're so right, and you just validate everything that I experienced last year, when my mom wasn't speaking and I could see her. She'd been through so much, and I would come in and do my dog and pony show, and I'd see her looking up to the right. Always she'd look up to the right like that, and I go, you got some words for me, don't you? You're looking for those words, and you're trying to get those words out. I'm waiting. I'd always tell her, I'm waiting. I got all the time in the world. I'm waiting. And I didn't expect anything. I just knew that she was trying, because I could feel her. I know her. And then she'd look at me with a big smile. She'd go, ah. But one day out of nowhere, Dawn was in the room, and this was 2 months before she passed. She just said clearly, like it was my mom from 20 years ago, I love you. And
she hadn't spoken for a couple months at least before that.
I
and
was
speak after.
floored. I was floored because I said, Mommy, what a gift. That was so hard for you. That was like running the marathon.
Yeah.
And she had
really
to tell me.
She did have to tell you. And I have seen that so many times I can't even tell you. Somebody who's, they talk about the rally right before they depart. I had a gentleman one time who had a severe neurodegenerative disease and hadn't spoken for years. And the day before he passed, it was like he woke up. And his sons were there from out of state and his family. And he's sitting there talking to them, telling them how much he loves them and how proud he is of them. By midnight, he was back to not being able to speak at all. And the next day, he took his leave. But what a gift that slice.
It's a gift. It's a gift.
Definitely.
It is such a gift. It's funny because I have dreams about that. I dream that my mom is totally talking to me, and I go, wait a minute. You're all better now? In my dream. She's like, why not?
So I have a question.
Dawn.
We talk about all the, these things that we as the family caregivers can do to communicate with them. But is there any hope for training the people, the medical staff, the nurses, the doctors, to do this? Because they don't know them. They can't read cues. They can't,
Right.
especially a doctor comes in and sees them once every 3 weeks, or a nurse, the staff's changed. They can't read those cues. What can we do to because
Help
that's
them?
super important. That's who's around them all day long, every day, and
Right.
has to deal
Right.
with them, and yet they don't know how to communicate with them.
It's called educate, 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 and then when you're done doing that, sit down and do some educating. We need to actually approach our medical schools, our nursing schools, our programs that are training people. The people who spend the most amount of time with these folks that are in facilities are the nurses' aides. They are the ones, that's your lifeblood. That's the backbone of the long-term care system. People don't
God,
realize
yes.
that, but it's
God, yes.
true. So we need to be educating them, and they want to learn, but they don't want to learn on a computer module tucked away far from the patient somewhere. We need more education. We need different methods of educating people, because so much of what they need to learn is more of a tactile, nonverbal sort of communication. You can't teach that in a book or in a video. You have to be there with them and tell stories and see how in those stories principles are demonstrated. But if we're doing that in our medical schools, in our nursing schools, and in our programs that train nurses' aides, and then if we're doing it in the hospital, doing it in the facilities, it's, once again, it's a humongous problem. And it's tempting to say, oh God, there's no hope for this. But that's not true either. We have a responsibility. Those of us who know and those of us who are aware have a responsibility to act. And when we don't, we're not only letting ourselves down, we're letting down our children and our grandchildren, because I can tell you that Alzheimer's and these other types of dementia are not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yep. You're right. Again, you're right. And I keep telling people that it's like, I'm not, some people don't really want to revisit what they've been through because it's hard.
Right.
And it feels like, maybe, it does, maybe it's not healthy that you're still thinking about that once your loved one's gone. But I feel differently. I feel like if I've seen and learned things that I can't unsee and unlearn.
See.
And so therefore I feel the responsibility to pay it forward.
Mm-hmm.
I feel the responsibility to say things and to educate. And some people aren't going to like me for it, and they're going to think I'm angry. I'm not angry. I'm heartbroken for people. That's all.
Yeah.
And I want people to be able to take power back. And the only way is by knowing what's going on and by sharing what you've learned. That's what you do every day. You share what you've learned with such immense heart. You're a lovely, lovely lady.
Oh, thank you, darling.
Thank you.
I knew that
Thank you.
that big heart would come in handy some days. It over the course of 43 years of a nurse, it's gotten broken more than once, but I'll tell you, it gets bigger each time it gets broken.
I
And
love
that's the
that.
way
My
that-
mom would love you.
that
She would be
works.
going, girl, let's go have a cup of coffee and talk about
I'm telling
things.
you. We'll
I'm
drink a
telling
little
you.
mash and talk a little trash. Let's go.
That's right. Oh, my mom would have loved you. My mom would have, and you'd have loved her too. Well, is there anything else that you want to bring up that we didn't bring up? Because we could talk forever, but I just enjoyed it. Anything else that we might have missed? I can assure everyone that we'll have all of your ways of contact in the show notes.
Yeah.
Where to find your book, where to find you, where your Facebook page is, and if you want some good support get a hold of this lady. She's a gift.
That's it.
I
You can tell
really
them. This is my
appreciate it.
motto. I know everything, and what I don't know, I'm not afraid to make up. So go ahead and call
There
me
you
up.
go.
And we'll do something.
Boom, Chuck. And I love that your philosophy about heart. We're all about heart, right, Don?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What gets us out of bed in the morning? Love gets us out of bed in the morning. You know,
Absolutely.
love lets us lay down at night and put our head on the pillow and know that because we were alive that day, the world is just that much better than it was if we hadn't been there. So
Aw.
it doesn't get any better than that.
Absolutely. And that is because, as we always say, love is powerful, love is contagious, and love conquers alls. We thank everyone for listening and joining, and please do, if you like what you heard, like it or subscribe or tell other people about it, because we got to get the word out. Share. And Susan, anything else you want to say before we say bye-bye?
I just want to say have a lovely, lovely rest of your day, night, whatever time you're listening to this, middle of the night. Who knows? Anyway, thanks for listening. We'll
All you
catch
gotta
you
do
next
is
time.
sing a
See you
song.
next time. Take care. Bye-bye.